We continue reading today in Synergetics in section 400, 3 sections 25, 26, and 30. Every system, as a subdivision of the total experience of universe, must accommodate traffic of inbound and outbound events and inward-outward relationships with other systems aspects of the universe. Effective thinking is systematic because intellectual comprehension occurs only when the interpatternings of experience events star foci into relationships return upon themselves. Then the case history becomes closed. A system is a patterning of enclosure consisting of a conceptual aggregate of recalled experience items or events having inherent insideness, outsideness, and omni-aroundness. Systems are aggregates of 4 or more critically contiguous relevant events having neither solidity nor surface or linear continuity. Events are systemic. Tiger skin. Typical of all finitely conceptual objects or systems, the tiger's skin can be locally pierced and thence slotted open. Thereafter, by elongating the slot and initiating new subslots therefrom in various directions, the skin gradually can be peeled open and removed all in one piece. Adequate openings of the slots into angular sinuses will permit the skin to lie out progressively flat. Thus, the original lunar gash from the first puncture develops into many subgashes, leading from the original gash into any remaining domical areas of the skin. The slitting of a paper cone from its circular edge to its apex allows the paper to be laid out as a flat fan intruded by an angular sinus. A sinus is the part of an angle that is not the angle's diverging sides. Sinus means in Latin a withoutness, an opening out, a definitively introduced nothingness. And we have a figure today, figure 400.30, and this shows 7 shapes that are very important to Fuller's geometry. These shapes are a tetrahedron, 4 sides, a cube, 6 sides, an octahedron, 8 sides, a cube octahedron, a rhombic dodecahedron, an icosahedron, 20 sides, and a dodecahedron, 12 sides. And then these are laid out here in a list. Now here is the 7. They're actually laid out in duals. So the tetrahedron is its own dual. And then you have a pair, cube and octahedron. You can see duals because 6 faces in the cube is the same as 6 vertexes in the octahedron. And vice versa, the octahedron has 8 faces, so the cube has 8 vertexes. That's the definition of a dual. And then these 2 shapes are dual to one another. The vector equilibrium, that's Fuller's name for the cube octahedron. We'll be seeing why later. Is 14 faces, 12 vertexes, and then these 12 vertexes here is now 12 faces in the rhombic dodecahedron, and 14 vertexes matches the 14 faces. And finally, the last 2 are also duals of one another, the icosahedron with 20 faces, and the pentagonal dodecahedron with 20 vertexes. And then this diagram also puts on the bottom Euler's formula. Euler's topological formula is F plus V minus 2 equals E, or F plus V equals E plus 2. F is faces, V is vertexes, and E is edges. In any system, 2 vertexes may be considered polarized. These 2 vertexes are then subtracted to balance the equation. This suggests the inherent two-ness of universe. We'll be taking a closer look at Euler's formula and Fuller's interpretation of that later, but it's worth pointing out here that the plus 2 is important to Fuller, and he generally interprets it as the fact that most round objects are spinning, and so the 2 is the polar axis that is implicitly created by spinning. Get to know these shapes. They're everywhere in Synergetics. You can buy Dungeons and Dragons dice set, and they will have the 5 platonic shapes that are listed here. And then the 2 extra shapes are a little harder to come by. If you have Zohm, you can build the rhombic dodecahedron out of the yellow struts. And the cube octahedron I built out of a Geomag toy. For those who want to stay for another moment, I'd like to now do a little more annotation. So I'm going to read it again, but this time commenting and annotating. For those who just wanted to hear it read aloud, well, that's been done. So let's now annotate. every system, as a subdivision of the total experience of universe, must accommodate traffic of inbound and outbound events and inward and outward relationships with other systems, aspects of the universe. So a system is a subset of universe. You always start with the universe, which is the whole. It doesn't all exist at the same time, but we can somehow conceive of it. And then a system is a subset of that. So it has things going into it and going out of it. And here we see exquisitely Fuller's trained thinking and his use of language, inbound and outbound. Fuller will always seek to use the prefixes and the word stems that are simplest in indicating to our conceptuality and comprehension what's going on. So here we have inbound and outbound and inward and outward. Effective thinking is systematic. So now again, thinking is a form of geometry. The whole book is called A Geometry of Thinking. There it is, Explorations in the Geometry of Thinking. And so thinking is systematic because intellectual comprehension, that is when we understand something in our mind, occurs only when the interpatternings of experienced events. Interpatterning. So we tend to think of our thoughts as static, as nouns. We're thinking a thought, and it seems to be constant in our mind. But in Fuller's training, he will always try to parse a singular event as a dynamic series of events in time, where the window of time occurs within our ability to focus on it. So it's an interpatterning of experience events. Star foci. Star is a key word. We saw that yesterday as well. Star means an undifferentiated point. So a star is something that you don't know yet what's inside it, and you can call it basically a noun or a vertex or a point. So to run it one more time, the interpatternings, how the patterns relate, of experience events, star foci. So an event is a kind of tiny thing, a unit, an undifferentiated thought. Interrelationships, they relate to one another, return upon themselves. So the intellectual comprehension can occur only when all of that returns upon itself, and then the case history becomes closed. Here we see a pun, case closed. The case history becomes closed. Case closed means you can now think. A system is a patterning of enclosure. So this closing is important here. There is enclosure consisting of a conceptual aggregate coming into our mind, an aggregation of recalled experience items or events having inherent insideness, outsideness, and omni-aroundness. And that's one of the themes of the sections we've been reading yesterday and today, that a system has an inside, an outside, and then aroundness. And Fuller will add the omni because the aroundness isn't enough. He wants to add omni, which is that it's in all directions. 400.26. Systems are aggregates of four or more critically contiguous relevant events. Now here we already said that a system is a conceptual aggregate. So what is the novelty here? Well, Fuller and Applewhite, his facilitator of this process of capturing Fuller's thought in writing, thought it's worth now indicating the minimal state of a system, which is four. Four is tetrahedron. Systems are aggregates of four or more critically contiguous. Critically means in close proximity or involving one another. Contiguous, overlapping and interrelating in time. Relevant events having neither solidity. Solidity is the quality of being full. Because in Fuller, as we're going to see, there are no solids. Like I'm holding this cube from my Dungeons and Dragons. It feels like we call it a solid. You learn in chemistry there are solids, liquids, and gases. But in actuality, when you examine solids, there's, of course, vast space between the molecules. So Fuller's going to urge us to reconsider solids and understand them more deeply as a certain type of structuring of the components. Nor surface. Surface, again, is a type of illusion. And we don't just mean here a Buddhist kind of illusion. It could be even color is a kind of illusion. So here, for example, surfaces are implied, and they're very real to our eye. We see surfaces, but as we know, surfaces are also a thing constructed by mentality and we're going to discuss more what that's like. And then linear continuity is the struts, the joiners between. Events are systemic. Events are characterized by being systems. And finally, section 30, tiger's skin. Typical of all finitely conceptual objects, it's very important in Fuller's thinking that all things are finite. His contrast generally is where the mathematicians and your school math, high school math, and college, you'll talk about finite and infinite. He likes to talk about definite and finite. So definite is a countable set, and finite is not countable, but it has to be finite because in Fuller's conceptioning, the universe is finite. It consists of a set amount of things because energy can either be created or destroyed. And various patterns like that indicate that whatever we have here, that's all we have. So it's not infinite. Typical of all finitely conceptual objects or systems, the tiger skin can be locally pierced and then slotted open. Thereafter, by elongating the slot and initiating new subslots therefrom in various directions, the skin gradually can be peeled open and removed all in one piece. By the way, if you really want to see a skin made into a rug, you can go to YouTube. There are hunters that upload videos like that, and the process is not geometrical. So here we're just using a colorful idea because we've seen skins laid flat, and we know that they used to describe an animal, which is a rounded shape, and the act of taking rounded shapes and making them flat is very important in synergetics because it relates to that a rounded thing. You can't see the back of it. You can only see the back of it by opening it up and making a map. So of course Fuller invented a map as part of this need to flatten, to make more prominent in our cognition that when we are thinking about something, we are in some sense, we cannot be thinking about the entire thing. We have to think about some subset of it, some conformal distribution of it. Adequate opening of the slots into angular sinuses will permit the skin to lie out progressively flat. Thus, the original lunar gash is a funny word. I don't recall it elsewhere in Fuller. So I think he means a crescent-shaped slit. From the first puncture, develops into many subgashes, leading from the original gash into any remaining domical areas of the skin. Domical, again, unusual word, like a dome. And of course, we know Fuller is famous for his domes. So the slitting of a paper cone from its circular edge to its apex allows the paper to be laid out as a flat fan intruded by an angular sinus. A sinus is the part of an angle that is not the angle's diverging sides. I think that's interesting. And again, as we read Fuller and train ourselves in the parts of Fuller's thinking that we wish to onboard as tools for our own thinking, always keeping in mind that whatever it is under your consideration, here the angle, then there is something that is not in your consideration, not the angle. And so here he is naming the sinus as the part that is not the angle. And we end with a bit of etymology. Sinus means in Latin a withoutness, and opening out a definitively introduced nothingness. Of course, we're all accustomed to the word sinus for our nose, which is the space within our nose. You may not have realized that the sine wave is also named because when the sine waves were first named, they took that word for bend or fold. So sinus in Latin is fold, implying a whole, implying a withoutness. Thank you for reading out loud with me.